I mean, related to what the question about diversity, the broad theme, but even B schools, because you are from a business school and so are we, the point was that there are not enough women choosing to get an MBA. And this is news. This is relatively new. Of course, in our business school, we have 40% girls in our PGDM program, but it is not a common thing. And still women are not. And if you don't have, Ms. Anand, girls entering the business school, how will they go to higher offices? I mean, where is the pipeline? So do you think this may change? How are we looking at the future? Are you hopeful?
Yeah. No. I think I first disagree with you that not enough women are coming. Okay. I think the way we had set up, and I can share with you IIMB's own experience over the last decade. Okay. I mean, 10 years or maybe 15 years ago, you could count the number of women in the batch. And I can say that for my batch too. I mean, we could just, you knew every single woman. In the last 5 years, okay, we have kind of moved to 30%. Okay. Now, where, how, and what do we need to do to make this happen? And I expect the numbers will go up further. Is that a large part of it we did was really focused, targeted. We went into girls' colleges. And we said, aspire to come to IIMB. Okay. And the moment we started nudging through role models and, professors who were at IIMB, who are MBA graduates from different management schools, and we went out and spoke to these absolutely brilliant women, young women in colleges, spoke about how they can navigate their careers. And we had young MBAs from our campuses go out. So when we did all of that, we actually saw the applicant pool increase.
Cool.
Yeah. So my key takeaway from that, and we did the same with persons with disability, and absolutely we are there because we had to become a more inclusive, physically infrastructure, inclusive school. We had to put a whole lot of pressure on faculty to teach inclusive, to make inclusive education happen. So I think if you just put those little nudges, I think inclusion is not difficult.
What about organizations, ma'am? Do you think, like you said, infrastructure is also important for diversity? And we are not talking about women only here. So when you're making an equitable workplace, you need infrastructure in place. And still, a lot of organizations don't do it very well.
Yeah, see, I think at the organization level, I think I want to kind of go back to what Ritu was talking about earlier, which is that why are organizations doing this diversity? I mean, I sometimes kind of get very worried when I see this D&I agenda, because today it's almost like everybody has to be in the bandwagon because it's the right thing to do. Okay, so it is a little bit like, so how will you then treat it? Yeah. Then how will you do it meaningfully or purposefully? Okay, and quite honestly, I think there are several arguments for business case, but I am not a great believer in business case for all this. This is just nonsense. So which means that organizations have to have only two reasons to do it.
Right.
One is that what she said, are we creating a more equitable place? Which means we actually are asking, are we a fair organization? So there is a fairness and justice perspective.
True.
Okay, and how far you want to take that depends on how progressive the organization is. You can actually say, I'm going to correct my historical wrong because we have never had these groups. You could go from there all the way to be able to say that I don't think I can correct it, but I shall be fair starting today. So whatever may be the case, I think it's possible. The other case through which to do it is to actually be able to stand up and say, boss, 50% of the world is my consumer. And I don't have representation of even 5% of that consumer in my organization. What kind of an organization am I if I am not able to see the representation of my community within the organization, and who am I creating all this for? Okay. Unless you have these two arguments, one is the learning argument and the other one is clearly the fairness argument, everybody else will fall by the wayside. And that's exactly why the Gender Empowerment Index, all gender indices for India are just going down.
Yeah.
Because in a patriarchy today, you're actually arguing for a business case. Boss, there is no business case.
Yeah. There has to be a fundamental reason for you to believe in this D&I.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so unless people begin to approach it from that way, we are not going to see the gender curve go positive. So that's the challenge.
Please come.
That nudging theory has worked wonderfully in our organization, Jeet and Vasanthi, on this women in leadership. Okay. I have 167,000 women in my company. Okay, 37%. And it is impossible for you to believe that none of them are good enough to be at the CEO level or CEO -1, 2 level. The differentiating styles of behavior of women, which is part of our DNA, has to be molded and nudged and coaxed to adopt the leadership model, which is designed traditionally, historically, fortunately by men. So either work take centuries to change that model, or I nudge these girls to first get up there, and then when more of you are there in the top of the pyramid, the models will automatically change. It's not that my guys are not empathetic. They are very empathetic, but that empathy has gone and slept somewhere. So unless they are surrounded by different people as their peer network, how will they know that there is an alternative way of leadership?
Nicely said. Very nicely
Some of the young people who are listening, when I joined 30 years ago, my big guy at that time asked me that, told me rather, that we are experimenting with you, whether you will, all sorts of things which are typically in the past men asked women. And you had to have guts to prove somebody wrong. Yes, you need to compromise on your personal front. What compromise? In the traditional way. Not a compromise, but what is considered to be compromise. Not cooking and going to office.
Time, yeah.
Hiring a help and this is something I want to put it out to young boys and girls, that don't believe gender disparity pay. Gender pay disparity, don't believe what you read, because the formula is wrong. I will pause.
I see Mr. Das has been smiling, and since he's the other gender representing this panel, I have to bring him into this conversation. And I will now steer it slightly more towards the student side. Now, I want you all to now really talk to our students. What you think is what they need. These are, and a lot of our students are already listening to you now, and they will probably listen to this recording later on. How do they, I mean, we were never prepared for this, but they are just on the threshold of their life. It's all unfolding now, and the world has had the most unprecedented crisis of several generations. What kind of skills do they need now? How do they cope with it? Siddharth?
Yeah. No, so Ritu alluded to the fact that this is not the first time we are seeing a crisis. From a financial crisis perspective, 2009 was much worse. The dot-com bust was also a big, shakeout. Even post-liberalization of India, 96, 97, 98, that period was very, meant because import duties had been slashed and imports had become cheaper. A lot of the old companies which could not adapt their cost structure. I mean, just think about Tisco. I mean, which was a behemoth with 80,000 people. During that period, they shed off almost 40,000 people through a VRS scheme. So change is a part of life. I think this is the first time when, along with the setback to the economic growth issue because of whatever restrictions that had to be put in place, there was also a health scare and crisis at an epic level, I mean, which nobody had encountered. So what is the learning from that crisis? I mean, one is that, of course, I think the learning for everybody has to be from this is that the resilience and the need to change and adapt to changing situations. And like students have adapted to, and teachers have adapted to teaching students online. I mean, my family, my boys are still in school. They are learning online. It's hard because they miss their school and missing, for some time it was even harder because you could not go out and play. But at the end of the day, I think Professor Srinivasan talked about the long-term impact on this, how much screen time is actually good or bad. I mean, as parents, me and my wife are very confused about this, because what do you do beyond?
The jury is still out.
The jury is still out because at the end of the day, they cannot go out to play any sport for some time and they're watching screen. Now at least it's loosened up, so it's better. And some of these games on screen is very addictive also, right?
Totally.
So coming back to the students itself, I think the fundamentally that way, I don't think anything that we have encountered in previous crisis, we have those learnings from there. It's about how do you adapt to change, how do you develop the resilience and inner resilience to fight. This magnitude of this also calls for a speed of urgency. I think one of the things that has got also is the empathy quotient. I would also talk about that because health by itself. See, one of the things is, we talked about HR as a great opportunity to set some of these practices. For the first time in my career of 25 years, actually health and safety became the number one priority in the company. That I must say. Nobody talked about debt, talked about business growth.
Yes.
Or profit or cost. I mean, if I have to say, spend the money to sanitize all offices, spend the money to sanitize all offices. If people have to sit at home, they have to sit at home. Period.
Yeah.
Nobody can come and
I don't want anybody falling ill on my charge. No way.
Some people said, "Nahi, band karna, branch kya, rostering karna hai kya?" Oh, baki, but they were quickly silenced because ultimately health and safety took. So I agree with Ritu. It is a golden opportunity to push an agenda, and championing has to happen from the top, whether it's a CEO. It's again not an CHRO thing. It has to, and our job as a CHRO is to make sure our CEOs are influenced to champion some of these opportunities. And I think to that extent, I must say that we always receive that support. There is no confusion on people priority being the number one priority, or even decisions like layoffs or some things like that. But going back to career skills, career is a marathon. There will be ups and downs, like anything in life. So my only takeaway from my own experience is this: have the resilience when you are down to stand up and keep fighting and keep going and learning, because ultimately we are all professionals who have to develop new skills and new ways of adapting to change. Because that is the only constant. I think the only limited point is what seems to be happening is the pace, the volatility of change seems to be just insane. Because change is not new, but the volatility is you're up, you're down. It's like that can be very unnerving, but it's like a roller coaster ride. So like you enjoy a roller coaster ride, you start enjoying this also. And once you get used to it, there's no problem.
I just think, Mr. Das, that when we are a little bit older, we are not so afraid of change in the roller coaster. We know what goes down will come up back one again. When you are young, when you are only 22, and you are at the cusp of beginning a very bright life.
Don't fear.
No, so
I say don't fear. Don't fear. And I'm very optimistic of the human potential. I don't see a dystopian world. Neither do I see utopia. All I'm saying is this is the real world. There will be ups and downs. We have to deal and probably a lot of us have faced a lot of ups and downs in our personal lives. There could be financial crisis, there could be death of a loved one. All of these are also crises which makes us strong and resilient.
COVID has caused so much distress in people's families.
And I agree that worrying about your placement might be an issue for some time because of jobs, and I completely accept that, because if in a growth economy you don't worry about jobs, you're only thinking of more pay, right? But imagine how much harder it is for somebody. But I'm sure with your pedigree and background, you are the top 0.001% of India's group. None of you should be worried about anything. That I must say, we are all fortunate that we've gone to institutions or we belong to institutions. Think of the larger context. I don't think so don't worry about a pay packet so much. All of you will have good jobs. Don't
That's
worry
so
whether
nice.
you're getting those outsized packages or not. It
It's
doesn't
good
matter.
to hear. It's good
Yeah.
because you reiterated what we need to hear. So thank you very much for that. Professor Srinivasan, one worry is, of course, probably getting jobs or internships, and that's constantly on young people's mind. But this is also challenging screen time as an adult. They are finding too much screen time. They spend so much of their waking hours only on the internet and the computer. There is this huge fatigue setting in. What can we do? What are the skills that they're not doing anything else? What is your take on it? You've been an academic for so long. You deal with students.
Okay, I think we are all digital immigrants. So therefore, no, we see this as pressure and they are in front of the screen time. I mean, they were in front of the screen time even before the pandemic, okay? It was on the mobiles, now they are in front of Zoom, finished. Okay, so let's not stress. And I think actually we have a problem rather than them, okay? They were on Twitter, they were on Instagram, they were on everything and they still continue to be on it. It is just that the mode has changed, okay? And they are also parallelly, just as well as faculty, we think they are listening to us. No such luck. WhatsApp is happening, Facebook is happening, Instagram is happening, along with watching you straight on the Zoom, okay? So I think the first point I want to leave is that digital natives, they are the 20-year-olds, okay? And they are a completely different entity from the digital immigrants like us who still carry the immigrant phobia like we do across the world. We carry it even into the digital space. So I am not so worried about them. I am more worried about us, okay?
Yeah.
The pandemic and its outcomes are more frustrating for us than it is for them, okay? So I think that's the first piece. There's no need to panic. They will cope with it far better. And they also know that the life cycle of every technology is 1.5 years and every software and apps is only 6 months. So they will do very well in the future because that is the reality.
So what about attention span?
Yeah, you are worried about it. I am not worried about it because Google is enough for them. Okay, and I'm coming to the next point. I don't think we should take ourselves so seriously. Okay, so the first one is that all the information they want, they will get it in Google, and Google is far better than any of us put together. Okay, at least we forget. Google does not even forget. The key issue. So in a way, for me as a teacher, all that I have to do is to make sure that they know the right keyword to search. Because otherwise, they won't be able to manage their lives with so much of information. So as long as they got the keywords, they will find the information. They'll find the data. Okay. Now comes the second part, and I don't envy them. I'm glad I'm a digital immigrant, which is when you have so much of information in front of you, to be able to sieve information to get insight. That's the difficulty. Yeah. So what we have is people pushing you with information which they don't know how to process, and what are the ways to process it, to present it, to influence somebody else. I think they have a much harder time because we anyway had to fall back on textbooks, and there's only so many textbooks that you can refer. But today, just look at the amount of information that they have, and they don't know what to do with it.
So what should they do?
So the first one, I think, and these are probably the 4 skills I keep thinking about. I don't know how we will make it happen, but I do know that they will probably pick it up on the way. The first one is sense making. Just making sense. And I'm sure they're struggling in their project work every day because they have downloaded everything that is available on the net, and they don't know how to start writing the report. Because there is a paralysis. And after you've done the first 3 sections, you don't know what to write because you have nothing original to say. So just seeing the patterns. So the first one is, how do I make sense of what is important and what is unimportant? Then from there, you move to actually saying, if I know what is unimportant and I know what is important, how do I check for patterns that what is important is indeed the right thing, between important and right? Because now, having so much of technology means that any idiot or a technology can tell you the difference between a right and a wrong. And in fact, a technology is better than a human. It's only between right and more right decisions where humans are needed. And where are we teaching them how to make a decision which is right and more right? Yeah. So it's interesting that it's not about information anymore. It's about insight. It's about identifying patterns. It is about making that distinction between right and more right. It is about getting greater personal clarity on the values that you will uphold and the things that you will not, the careers that you will choose and the careers that you will not. Yeah, so in a large number of ways, I think the pandemic will force them. And the time has already begun where they've got to look inwards instead of looking outward. And that's exactly the opposite feedback we gave the digital immigrant generation. Oh, look out, seek mentors, seek coaches, find people to support you. We now have to say everything is available to you in the environment. Just look inside, do pattern matching, get your insights. Insights are the ones that make action happen.
So well said.
That is the challenge.
Looking inward. And I'm going back to Ms. Anand now for her take on this advice or skills, things that, and because she's a psychologist also, so she may have something to add to this.
Actually, this cyclical, what goes and comes back. Short skirt was in fashion, then long skirt came, and then after 10 years, short skirt will come back again. And all that will continue in behavior and in ecosystem and organizations also. That is perfectly true. Very well articulated by Vasanthi. And I would say 2-3 things which I have been talking about for some time now, especially one or 2 years, that view that failure as a teacher, that don't be scared of failing. This is for the teachers and professors. This is for leaders and managers. This is for mother and father. And this is equally true for young children who are in school, college, or in B schools. That failure is something which has taught me. There's another nice word for failure, which is called experiences. Okay, so sometime you will have success, sometime you will have failure. So I want you to embrace failure. Don't fail all the time, but you have to learn from the failure. Yeah. As long as you get that mindset, I am complimenting what Professor Vasanthi Srinivasan has said. Look inward. So that is number one. Number two, you have to work toward the big C, which is the confidence. And that will, any pandemic, any plague, any swine flu, any financial crisis will actually wade through very easily. That capital C and one capital P, patience. These are the 3 things which I have always kept in front of me. It's not that like we are all laughing all the time. We are happy all the time. My boss has also scolded me. She will also throw here and there papers, and you will not have a good day. You have not done something right, or you have been reprimanded for something what you did right, but somebody did not listen to you. Who do you go to? Every time you cannot go to anybody. So confidence, patience, and accepting failure as a learning platform is, girls and boys will never fail you. It doesn't cost money, but it does it needs processing. At night, psychology taught me a tool, which is very free tool, auto suggestion. Why am I sad? But that's okay. Tomorrow I can undo it. No, I can't undo it. So, like this, talking to myself can be a little foolish sometimes, but late at night in your mind, it really worked for me. So all of you can, whether it's pandemic or otherwise, but that is how coaches and mentors and teachers were born, right? So you would need to talk to somebody. Counselors, coaches, mentors, counselors are getting paid too much. because you want somebody to listen to you. If you can't talk to yourself and listen to yourself, professors are there, parents are there, mentors are there, friends are there. Have a friend, and
Have a
that
friend.
is always,
Very
always.
useful. So auto suggestion and have a friend. And like you mentioned, you called out to the boys and girls. I'm going to call out some boys and girls now to ask you a question directly. And I was hoping if we have Nikhilesh in our audience, and he can go first.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go on.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So it was very great listening to the three panelists before I start with my question. So my question was that, with this pandemic coming and work from home kicking in, the space between the personal and professional life is blurred. So what are your views as an organization? Should we be bringing policies to enforce strict working hours and protect, the right to disconnect in its essence? So this was my question.
Let me ask Mr. Das to answer, and then we'll go to Ms. Anand first, because he did mention about this, people log in at 7:30.
Oh, he's the right person to answer this.
No, so to be honest, we have not mandated it, but we are encouraging people. So what we've done is what we call silent hours during work time. We are also sending out communication to say that please respect people's privacy after a certain time. Don't make, I think it's not a morning issue, but I find it a late night issue. People calling you, or rather they will WhatsApp you at 10 o'clock and they expect you to get a revert. And that's what people complain about, right? When I do talk to people, they say that, okay, 10 o'clock, somebody's WhatsApping you, 11 o'clock, and they expect you to revert. So we are trying to sensitize people and remind them that you cannot intrude into people's personal space. And what we are telling people is, if you've switched off your phone, if you're not responding to WhatsApp after office hours, it's absolutely fine. Don't take that pressure. So in a sense, what we're trying to do is we are encouraging people, sensitizing them that you cannot be invading people's personal lives. But have I taken any coercive action against anybody for violating it? Not yet. And I would rather that we encourage and nudge people to behave right, rather than threatening people that if you go wrong, I will, send you a warning letter or do something more drastic.
Right.
Of course, red lines is, if they cross red lines are red lines. That's a harassment. But this is like, it's not harassment. This is, in a sense, it's harassment if people send you, but it's not like anything abusive or anything, what do I say, which could be personally humiliating or offensive in that sense.
I think Sri Lakshmi has a question which Ms. Anand can very nicely answer. Sri Lakshmi, are you there? Can you ask the question, dear?
Yes, ma'am. Hi. So, hi, ma'am. This was such a nice meeting today. So, my question was that, like, what do you think? Like, to what extent will the work from home impact client-facing role?
We are, you see, this question I would not ask again, but there is no choice. You can't travel. The business has to happen. So you look at alternatives, and the alternative is there in terms of Teams or whatever technology that you use. And today I feel that I have known Professor Vasanti and Vinita for many years. Okay, I can it's almost like coming to her house or her college or her study table and asking her what books are behind you. Or Jeet, of course, I'm not taking name because I know him for many years. So so it's today I don't want to compare having a coffee in person, touching. I do miss touch and feel, but I can hold it. It's okay. It'll come later. So if I want to talk, I just write, Jeet, can I call you? And then we do video and it's up close. So I mean, I don't need to be in person. So that's the way customers also have to be approached. We are acquiring new customers, and so is all organization. If you have to grow, you have to think this is the way of life. Don't expect it will go in 6 months, 5 months and all. All of us, including our CEO, COO, chairman, they have not traveled for business at all. Our customers don't want us to come. They are not coming, but we are still growing and business is growing. So life is normal. We are strong, we are confident, we are patient, and
new normal.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to use that word, the abuse word, new normal.
Okay, I'll give you a new
No,
word.
but I'll make one point. Sorry, Professor. Professor, please go on.
Sorry, no, Judhajit. No, I was just telling I'll give you a new word, okay? No new normal. It's called intermittent normal.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
very nice.
I
After
got it.
intermittent fasting, huh? So
Intermittent normal.
That's also faddish.
no, so I just want to add a point. I mean, it's a bit of a question in my mind because most of us, like I've been 20 years in the company. So if I don't meet my team, they worked with me for the last 15 years, all of them. So I don't miss, physical proximity as much because on the phone or Zoom or all that, we know each other well and we have a trust level and everything else. I am waiting to understand for new people who are joining the work, how difficult or easy it has been for them. I don't have enough insight to talk on their behalf, but I was just wondering if I was in their shoe and I'm, joining at work, how does the socialization process would it take longer for me? I would guess it will. I would not guess it. I would say it will. But again, like everything else, life goes on. We learn to adjust and make do with what we have. And don't worry, you'll get your chance soon.
Yeah,
Professor
Judhajit, you don't have to wait so long. I shall share my experience with you. In the April of 2020, I took over. I went from being an individual contributor to a manager leading a team of 36 people.
Wow.
And I knew exactly 2 people from that team. Okay, so I can tell you what a nightmare it was because I spent 3 days going over CVs of every single person on the team. I looked at the previous year appraisal that was done by the managers to figure out what it is that each of them did. And then I did Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting every single day, cracking all 36 individual interviews. And then I went on weekly Zoom meetings. And in between this, we lost a team member to COVID. And we did kind of almost like what do I call that? I can't even call it a condolence because we did it in 1.5 hours after we knew that she had passed away. Okay. So in some ways, the biggest challenge. So I've done coffees, I've done Antakshari, I have, you name it, because I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah, so you found a way. You found a new way. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that
difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult because what would have taken me 5 minutes or 15 minutes actually took me 4 months to make happen. So I don't think there is a shortcut to it, even though I have learned it the hard way. But I just want to say that that's probably the most difficult thing. Yeah, thank you for kind of raising that because.
And ma'am, there are a lot of students waiting to ask you questions. I would quickly let them ask and ask them to be brief. Aditya, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. So good evening, everyone. So my question is, once the lockdown and the work from home began in March, we have seen a spike in the number of people who have started upskilling themselves using online courses and all. So as a manager of tomorrow, say once we get back to a physical office, so how do I motivate my team or my employees to continue the upskilling?
Why would you expect that the upskilling will stop? Because my expectation is, or my experience is, that this upskilling have actually got them used to that learning is good and they are getting better roles, they are getting promoted faster if they are, and this is for organization to do, they are getting wider opportunities, they are going places. In today, if you are a manager, you are becoming a director, you are becoming, if you are a developer, you are becoming a designer. So that momentum has to work both ways. If they see the benefit, virtual or in person, it doesn't matter at all.
I think that's a very good point, ma'am. That people will getting into the mode of learning and lifelong learning. Can I ask Miti Jyoti to come in and ask a question? Miti, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, go on.
Good evening, everyone. My question is regarding sustainable HRM practices. I want to know what are the important considerations that as academicians or as researchers should keep in, or we should look for while building sustainable HRM models for future of workplaces? Since we are looking at a lot of changes happening right now in the way we work, the traditional idea of sustainability also has to change, because we are now looking to teach or to incorporate or build sustainability through online methods, through channels which have to change. The method of communicating or preaching the ideas have to change. So if we have to achieve a sustainability in HR practices, what are the things that we should be keeping in mind? Or we should be focusing to study or researching further or exploring further? I hope I'm making sense of what I want to know.
Yeah, I can take a shot at it. I think your lack of clarity is also about the lack of clarity on these issues from a research perspective. Okay. So I think one of the things that I would look at, so I think at 3 levels, HRM has to be studied, and which I think we are not doing enough of, is that when the individual begins to change, okay, what's the nature and type of engagement? And I'm just going to give you some 2 insights, one from China and one from India, and they kind of will illustrate to you what it means. Is that immediately after the pandemic lockdown was lifted, there were several reports that were published of people went and bought luxury goods in China. And the belief was that, anyway, I have only one life, and if I was gone, I wouldn't have been able to afford it. Let me buy. And you won't believe exactly the opposite response after the lockdown, which said, let me save more, because if I had savings, my life will get taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay. So it kind of asks this question, what's the way individuals cope with a crisis of this magnitude? So that's at one level, Mitijoti, your question. At another level, you are asking, do traditional practices for several years that we have perpetuated in the context of hyper competition, are they actually relevant when you want people to collaborate, particularly given that there is uncertainty which is going to persist for at least 24 to 36 months? Now, that's a whole set of issues, questions that one has to ask from an organization's point of view. And a third one, which I think I would love to see more research on in the future, is that it's not as if organizations and individuals are changing. The societal impact, particularly when you have demographics of countries like ours, rural, urban, and then you're looking at young people, what does this mean at a societal level? I think all of these today we don't have answers for. And in particular, if I was looking at, I'd probably look at 2 sectors very, very closely. And one of them is clearly the healthcare sector. And the other sector that I'd love to kind of actually look at in greater detail is because these 2 have COVID implications, which will pan out 10 years from now, is the education. 1 year of not going to school has put children back by 5 years and has put malnutrition back by 12 years. Okay. So obviously these implications will only pan out 10 years from now. Yeah, so those would be research questions dying to be studied in today's context.
Very, very insightful. Thank you so much, Professor Srinivasan. Jatin is here. He has a question to ask. Jatin Jose.
Thank you, ma'am. And a very good evening to all the speakers. My question is more from an academic perspective. I was just wondering, how can we go back in the work value chain to, let's say, graduate and pre-graduate levels, and make sure that every course that is relevant to your organization has an element of adequate digital literacy or any other forms of emerging trends that you see fit for the workforce, to prepare them to contribute more from day one itself? Because I believe there's a cost and time involved for training itself. And is there something that is being done and something that is not being done in this regard till now?
Yeah. I am happy to take that because we are doing some soul searching on it, on what does this really mean. And I think an institution like yours has really you're several notches ahead of other schools across the country in terms of your own social commitment. And so I would actually kind of go back and ask this question, saying, if there is somebody who's actually kind of initiate that, it's probably institutions like yours. I mean, in particular, I know the work you've done over the last several decades, and I deeply respect and admire the work you do, you continue to do. So one is, I would actually move from a shareholder perspective to a stakeholder perspective. And anyway, Section 135 of the Companies Act legitimizes it, and for the first time calls out. So if you have the financial system actually looking at a stakeholder perspective, we ought not to follow the shareholder perspective. Okay, so I think that is the kind of fundamental. And the other one that we're going to talk about, and Make in India is fantastic, but what is it that's going to happen about the supply chains? We are global supply chains, okay? And that is our highest risk in the country. So what are we going to do there, okay? Let's look at climate. How does that come in when you're looking at operations management? Look at product life cycle management. What are we actually talking about in terms of handling responsibly? Okay. So if I were today on a clean slate, be able to create a curriculum, yeah, I would actually start with the national guidelines on responsible business conduct. I would just pull that document. It's a beauty of a document. Just download it from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs website. And I would actually sit down and say, how do I make this happen? Great question, Jatin. Great question. I just wish I had such power to do that transformation overnight.
And what a out of the ballpark answer, Professor Srinivasan. Jatin was expecting a digital course answer. And what have you told him? We have to go and download that document now, haven't we?
Thank you, ma'am.
That basics, sometimes we have to go to the basics to get to the level that what you are asking, and previous to you, that girl was asking. Both the questions are actually related to be answered in the way Professor Vasanti has answered, because you have to go to the basics. Very well said.
I'll just come in with another, add another perspective to this. You know, one of the things that's happening globally, it's a lot of interest, is what are called ESG funds, environment, social, and governance, right? There's a framework. So today, a lot of investors across the world are saying that they want ESG specific funds, companies which rate at a certain threshold. It's all about weaving sustainability into a business model. So one is on the environment side, which we all understand. The social aspect covers what you're doing for communities, what you're doing for your employees, and governance is about what kind of processes and practices you have to ensure independence of your board functioning, the way it works, all of that. It is, I mean, there is $1 trillion that are moved into ESG specific funds. So I don't think it's a fad. I genuinely think it's the way consumers are going to be thinking, because there are a lot of people who are concerned about sustainability, increasingly so, and about ethical business practices. And therefore, there will be pressure on companies to get their ESG scores up, and it will create a lot more transparency in terms of how business is done. And I'm sure over the next few years, we'll see much more traction for it. And companies which do not fare well will struggle to attract, because the way fund managers will do is they will set thresholds. If I could perhaps invest 3% in your company, because your ESG scores are low, maybe I will take it down to 1.5%. So they will they will not utilize the full in that sector or for that fund. And if companies are starved of capital, they're forced to be adapted, because ultimately shareholder value maximization is woven in through the ESG score in a sense.
Yeah, Judhajit, I can't help it, but after you said that, it just struck me that look at the social stock exchanges. I mean, that's really kind of going to kind of pick up in the future. So, if you're kind of saying what's going to be the future, then that's probably another place to pick up, because policy itself is evolving just now. I mean, I think you guys and girls are living in exciting times. Huh?
A lot of new stuff. Absolutely.
Now we have a very basic, fundamental question that I have Sai Prashant asking you all.
Hello, am I audible?
You are.
Firstly, thank you for the insightful session, panelists. And my question is, how are the opportunities, job opportunities, can we foresee at this point of time from the market? And what we as a students must keep in mind while preparing for them? And what can we expect from the market at this point of time? So this is the basic question.
So I'll take, see, I think sitting where we are today, the general view is the worst is over, and optimistic about growth because of the vaccine around the corner. And you know what happens also is when there is a bit of a slowdown, there is, I mean, there is a pent-up demand that anyway comes. So I think next year, 2021 should be good, assuming the London coronavirus and all of that doesn't derail the plans. Difficult to forecast. You know, I hate making, you know, futuristic statements because one really doesn't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But sitting where you are with whatever little knowledge you have and talking to people around you, and generally based on whatever information you have, I think definitely I would bet on growth picking up. And please understand one thing also. I mean, in any kind of a change situation, there are always some winners. And the winners are people who adapt and quickly adapt to change or innovate business models. So new industries will happen. I mean, just imagine sanitizers business, right? The mask business. And now I see innovation in mask, all kinds of designs, patterns, jewelry also on the mask. I mean, you think about it. I mean, it's kind of insane, no? That somebody would pay 5,000 rupees for a mask embellished with jewels so that you look fancy for a wedding. People are actually selling this kind of stuff.
I know.
So,
Silver mask that came into the market in the very first month I saw.
So imagine there is there is entrepreneurship even in this, right? So don't take away the ability of people to innovate and be entrepreneurial and make lemonade out of lemons. So that goes for all of us. But at a more fundamental level, I think again, see what happened. I mean, not to say the hardest hit is always going to be the people at the margins. Big organizations which have access to capital, which have much more depth of resources, will definitely be able to maybe either cannibalize on market share or be able to withstand this and come out even stronger. So that is, however, you know, the people who have a lot of debt, organizations, individuals will struggle in this environment, right? So over leveraging is never a good idea for, I think, at a general principle. So to come back to that question, I think the job market is going to be positive and you will see a lot of pickup, and there'll be new sectors, new kinds of innovation that will happen. Some of the jobs that were there in the past may not see demand, but there will be new kinds of jobs that will emerge, and that is wonderful. I mean, we are looking for ESG resources, just as I said. I mean, 2 years back, I would never thought of, okay, what is this ESG, right? So new jobs will emerge also.
Make a note, everybody.
Web developers, app developers. 5 years back, nobody would think so much about it, right? UI, UX, now you're talking about CX. So new jobs are coming.
Yeah.
So we have to be prepared for those kind of jobs, right?
Yes, sir. Sir, also have one small question. So according to you, what did you find most efficient? The offline one or the hybrid model that we are going to have in the future?
Like, no, hybrid is more efficient. Of course, it is more efficient. We were debating the effectiveness for certain situations. It is definitely efficient, because just imagine if I travel to Bangalore and back or travel to Calcutta and back, the time taken. I mean, it's also relaxing for some people. Some people like traveling because they get used to it, because it's a break, you stay in a hotel. All that will take away all those corporate perks. Right?
But carbon emissions will be reduced. Unnecessary travel.
And organizations will say, why do you need to travel now? You know, soon. And honestly, I mean, ultimately, because there was no option, you know, and some of the things continue because that was the legacy. It was okay if you are a sales head, you have to travel to so many branches and so many things. Now people will revisit that. Maybe if they were traveling once in a quarter, now they'll travel once a year. I'm not saying it will go away. It will become physical and digital. Like physical retail is there with Amazon also. You will want to go to a mall, or you will also buy on Amazon. Similarly, you will also do Zoom meetings, and you will also do face-to-face one-on-one meetings. So my view it's always going to be phygital.
hybrid is going to stay, is the future.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sai. Any final words from all three of you for our students? Ms. Anand, would you like to say anything to our students, please?
Very simply, almost the intermittent or new normal has arrived, is the way I want you to look at it. No need to reskill yourself. Skill frameworks are out of the window. Just gather abundance of drive, energy, passion, executive presence, communication, articulation, amplification. If you have all this with the very old traditional values, I'm sorry about this noise, hard work, sincerity, discipline, you are done for life. And I had done a survey, music to Professor Vasanthi Srinivasan's ears. My sample, was huge, statistically reliable type, 40, 50,000 respondents. So what I'm saying is, listen to seriously. Way forward is specialism. Generalism is not going to take you ahead far beyond. Generalist people who manage others or give orders or get things done, when the downturn comes, they are the ones who will be made redundant first. So the survey confirmed, my mind confirmed, my experience says, get a specialization, not in terms of go and do masters and all that. Now, no need after MBA, this double masters also, MBA also. I'm not saying all this. In your mind, roll up your sleeves and tell yourself, this is what I can do. This is what I like the best. While I will do what my organization tells me to, this job is where I am not going to get things done, but I'm going to do. You see, you are going to be a CEO one day. Even at that time, your CEO, as a CEO, you should be doing one thing yourself. What good is a manager? I don't want a manager who just get things done. Get aside. That kind of a message I'm leaving for you.
That's a wonderful message. Very, very nice, Ms. Anand. Thank you so much. Mr. Das?
No, so I concur absolutely. You can't just be the top, we describe a manager as a person who, coordinates, who, organizes, plans, all that is important, but you have everything can be digitally organized for you, coordinated for you, and you don't need a manager to do this planning, organizing, and snooping over you to see whether work is to be done. Like we talked about self-managed people earlier also. So therefore, the manager job will become redundant in a sense, because that is becoming increasing, or the spans will, so it will become more flatter. I mean, one manager will probably be there for 20 managers, because there is the need for certain things of coordination and transmission of information, but it will definitely become flatter. However, I want to say one thing, which is, the two biggest, in my experience, and since all of you are young and you're joining work, the two things that definitely derail careers. One is entitlement mentality. Please understand that every day you are being paid, right? And you got your pay. So you can't expect, can't go about thinking I'm special. The organization always comes first, right? And if you are saying that I come before the organization, you will be in for a root shock, because ultimately it's a collective effort, it's a team effort, right? So while every organization has top talent and it will reward differentiate and all that, we have to all understand we are part of a team, and the team is paramount, like everything else, right? So that is one part of it, the entitlement. The other part is a different way of saying it. We talked about it. It's humility. It's very important to be a specialist. I do not want to take away the need for specialism. You have to be good at what you do. Excellence, getting into detail, not be superficial. All that is absolutely valid. But specialism doesn't mean that you become dogmatic. That there is only one way of doing things. As things change, environments change, situations change, context changes, you have to adapt your specialism to that context, right? And I think the point of a specialism is that, and you find it in medicine, you'll never find a cardiologist telling you about what a neurologist does. At best, the cardiologist will say, okay, I think this is my opinion, but you please consult a neurologist. The problem in a lot of organizations is people who don't know anything about anything talk about everything. So that is So when you speak, you should be respected for what you speak because you know what you know. And that is always respected. So faffing is not a very good option, and therefore being superficial is never recommended. Be detail oriented and know your stuff. I mean, thank you for that. Yeah.
So humility is underrated, really.
Yeah.
It takes us a long distance. Professor Srinivasan.
Yeah. I mean, one of the nicest things is having Ritu and Judhajit go before me, because then all my points have got knocked off and I just have two of them left. And I think that reinforces what both of you said. When you are in a virtual world or hybrid world, right, I'm beginning to see more and more you need the capacity to build on others' ideas. Because no one knows it, but everyone knows something. And therefore, when ideas get shared, how do you build on the ideas of others? And I like the point Judhajit said of don't be dogmatic. Yeah, I think the other thing is go beyond, don't be dogmatic, actually build on others' ideas, because I think that is going to be a capability that we have to learn. I don't think our education system has fostered that, because we're constantly raising our hand to say how different we are. Okay, so I think that's the first one that I want to leave. And the second one, I don't know, I'm sure both of them are seeing it more, but I'm realizing that credibility in a virtual world, that is coming from people who really don't know you. And yet they are going to be kind of talking about you. And I have found that in the last 6 months that the people who've spoken about me are the people who've never met me. So which means other forms of media, other digital, whatever assets, they are using very different metrics to make sense of you. So what does it mean to be credible in such a context is something just be mindful when you get into the organizations, because you are noticed not for what you have done, but you are going to be increasingly noticed for what you did and did not remember that you had done it or did not know that you had done it. Yeah, and that's a very new world of credibility, and one has to think about what that means to each one of you. Yeah, and last but not the least, and I'm going to close with this, is I think the next 15 years would be the years of entrepreneurship. Just do it. Okay? I think just because companies are going to need intrapreneurs, social sector is going to need entrepreneurs, and government needs innovation. And it's at this intersection that you are passing out. Yeah, so don't miss the bus. And what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, 1 year of your life goes unaccounted, 2 years of your life, so be it, because you acquire skills that most other people will not possess. So be bold, be brave. I think that's what I would say.
Wonderful, wonderful. What you just said, and I feel like we should record this and play it again and again, over and over again, for all of us, for the whole batch. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been a very enriching session, and especially because we have got, all three of you have brought something. You can see the audience hasn't left their seat. They have just loved, and we are just soaking in every word that you have just said. Thank you so much. And I'll just hand over back to our student compares who would like to close the session for today.
Thank you so much, Vinita ma'am. On behalf of SPJMR's OBHR committee, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers and moderator of the evening. I'm totally in awe of how this discussion has evolved, and I feel so privileged to have been part of this session. I'm sure my friends here totally echo my thoughts, and all of us here have got some real good insights and perspectives regarding the future of work, workspaces, and culture. I would now like to request our faculty head, Professor Sushmita, to kindly say a few words.
Thank you so much. I just would like to say that what a wonderful session this was. What a blend of theory and practice. We always tell our students, that you have to get insights into both these areas. But what a wonderful session this is. I just can't but convey a heartful gratitude to all the three speakers on behalf of SPGMR. It was so wonderful. I'm sure this recording will almost become like a Bible for our future managers. And they are going to pick up very deep insights on how they need to conduct themselves when they join businesses of the future. Like the motto of our institute, influencing practice and building value-based leaders, I think this session today has given immense learning to all our students. You have nudged themselves, and I'm sure that you are going to become role models for them in the future. And of course, the infectious enthusiasm of all three of you, I must say, was so amazing. Thanks a ton for your valuable time, and we wish you the very best in all the future endeavors that you would carry out in the organizations. Thank you so much once again.